For 10 long years, Tony Blair was head of government of the United Kingdom and his wife, Cherie Blair, the First Lady. Cherie Blair never anticipated she would be in the limelight as much as she was in those years, and more so for controversial reasons that got her a lot of bad press in the British media. She's now written an autobiography, Speaking for Myself, and she joins us today to talk about the book and life after Downing Street. Mrs. Blair, the books evoked such sharp reactions, and both from politicians as well as the press, and it's very different. And how have you reacted to all that?
Well, I think a lot depends on whether you've actually read the book or not. And if you have read the book, you will know that this is a woman's book, really, and it's a book about one woman's journey over 50 years, coming from a simple background, a simple beginning in Waterloo in Liverpool, and ending up having this amazing ringside seat on 10 years of history. But a lot of people, I think, expected the book to be a political book and are still writing reviews as if it was a political book, but in fact it isn't. I think that makes the difference.
There are a lot of personal details that you've discussed in the book, and they've of course been discussed in the media as well. Your husband possibly read the manuscript as well, and how did he react? Because it wasn't just about you, it was about him as well.
Well, it was of course partly about him, but the political book actually is his to write, and he will write that book. I think some of the things that I write about, which are perhaps more personal, because it's about what it's like to live in Number 10, what it's like to be a family in Number 10, and what it's like to be a family that goes on a political journey, if you like, as the head of the family, my husband, progresses in his political career. Tony did read the book, and he enjoyed it.
And he had no qualms about being talked about, talking about maybe even your pregnancy or your miscarriage for that matter. He was okay with that?
Well, partly I think because he saw it as my story, and as I say, this was a book I wrote almost as if I was this is telling the woman's story. And for me as a woman to tell my story and not mention my pregnancies or indeed my miscarriage would be a travesty of what I am, really.
Your book has a lot about, your strength and your personality. You've grown up as one of, say, 6 sisters, really,
Eight,
really. And it's just a lot of women around you all the time. You had very little male influence growing up. And how was that for you?
I think that's true, and that's I think what makes me so strongly in favour of women and women's rights, because I come from a family that I was brought up by strong women and women who had to basically stand on their own 2 feet.
Your financial problems are actually run as a theme through the book. And is that something that's sort of bothered you, and being that breadwinner for the house that you call yourself, has that bothered you in some way, or is it just pride, really?
I think it's again it's this whole question of what life is like for so many people. I think particularly today, but actually even then, back in the 50s and 60s, there were many families that couldn't survive without the additional money that women were bringing into the household. And of course, in my case, my mother was the main breadwinner, and that made a big difference. But my grandfather and my grandmother, traditionally, my grandfather always gave his wages to his wife, and she would then give him pocket money, but she would then manage the family finances. And I think that's something that happens quite often across the world. In fact, I think it's not totally unheard of even in India, right, that happens. And so, but we didn't have a vast surplus of money, and I tried to make it clear in the book that my family, we were not the poorest of the poor, but we certainly didn't have any money over at the end of the week, and that managing within your budget was something that was very much drilled into me.
But your financial troubles, you even talk of them, while your husband got into politics, even at a time when you got into Downing Street. They continued, and that seems surprising for a, global audience.
Well, I think it's not as surprising as you might imagine. And people who go into public service often do so. They certainly don't do so because they want to make a lot of money, because you don't make a vast amount of money in public service. That's not what public service is all about. And therefore that discipline of making sure that you balance the books is still something that's very real to people in public life. And the books may be slightly bigger, and certainly I wouldn't claim that we didn't have my children were brought up in what would definitely be described as a middle-class household, and so didn't face the same sort of choices that my mother and my grandmother had to make for me when I was being brought up in a much more modest household. But that didn't mean that there still aren't choices to be made.